in the caption.
Okay.
Good morning. Hello there. So welcome. And this vlog is very, very different, but very exciting. And I am delighted to welcome Jan Farkas to this vlog. And in a moment, I'll ask Jan to introduce himself. What I will say, though, to get the story started, is Jan and I were introduced through some personal agility system training that we were involved with the Personal Agility Institute. And it's been wonderful, the discussions that have emerged from us being involved with that training. Hey, Jan.
Hello, Susie. Thank you for the intro. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, no problem. So, Jan, do you want to just explain a bit about what we discovered we have a shared passion for and say a bit about your kind of background?
Yeah, so we've met at Personal Agility, basically because we both are agilists. But it seems that we got into this field from a very different area, let's say, because I have a background in STEM, so science and engineering, and you seem to pick up on that when we met.
Yeah, like straight away, I was like, oh, I need to speak with him. This is so interesting.
Yeah, so this is how we started, right? And we talked a lot about family learning, STEM education, especially, and how we could help children and teachers and parents in helping their children to get into STEM, which is a path I embarked on personally. So I'm by no means an education expert, so take everything with a grain of salt, I say, but as a father of two, interested in STEM, and having had this background, yeah, I was happy to share with you a few thoughts about this.
Yeah, and it's been wonderful getting to know you, but also kind of understanding those connections more. So in a moment, I'll explain about why I immediately was so keen to find out more about your background. Because as you say, great that we're both agilists, but to look at these different areas that we've both got an interest in, I realised that your study and your work experience around STEM type of subjects really is something that I don't have as much direct expertise that I can bring to the table, because it's not an area that I have naturally found easy myself on my own learning journey. So I often joke that, the thing I was the most pleased about in my A-levels here in the UK was getting my A-level physics pass, because I found it incredibly difficult. And that was in spite of having a lot of support and encouragement at home as well. And I still found it difficult. But because I really loved maths and I did well in maths, it gave me the skills to want to persevere with that. And with my experience of family learning, what I have seen is that not only does the data, the statistics show that there is, a real issue, of course, around STEM skills shortages, which is widely recognised. But it's an area curriculum-wise that I really tried to encourage when I was in a leadership role in designing family learning programmes. So before we get into the questions, just to give a couple of examples for viewers. So family learning is, the definition of family learning is any learning activity where there are learning outcomes for adults and children, right? So a couple of the family STEM examples that we devised when I was in a leadership role in that field were what was called family bloodhounds. So it was around the world land speed record and the high speed car and everything that goes into designing that and the actual competition itself. But we also did loads of programs around mathematics, of course, keeping up with the children, mathematics, and lots of numeracy based activities that were intergenerational, as well as adults only, understanding how to support their children with their maths homework, for example. So that kind of sets the scene. And I know just to say, I'm based in the UK, and Jan, you're based in?
in Switzerland.
In Switzerland. So it's been very, very interesting comparing and contrasting as well our experiences of the different systems. So first of all, Jan, I'd like to just explore with you this concept of STEM, right? So science, technology, engineering and maths. And as we referred to, I know in the UK a few years ago, they added an A in there for STEAM, for the arts, which, as I understand it, would include things like digital music making and, you know, so forth. So technology linked to, you know, filmmaking and so forth. Now, what do you think of STEM being referred to as STEM, almost as an entity, you know, holistically, as a curriculum type, you know, rather than actually splitting those different elements out?
I think it's a matter of how close you are looking at it. So it's similar to, if you look from far afar, then you can see UK. It's basically a country, isn't it? Now, if you are in Wales, though, that's not England, and that's not Scotland. So if you are in it, they are very different. So the ways they think, the questions they are trying to answer, is very different, which is very important in this context, I think, because these are three things to me. Let's leave art now. I'm not an expert on art for sure. So if you dissect science, engineering, and mathematics, then if you identify that you or your child is interested in any of them, it doesn't mean that they will be interested in any other of them. So it can be the case, and it can be otherwise as well. So it's worth, I think, to get a bit more into this, if you will. What is the difference? So
yeah, well, just to say, I mean, you've got me thinking now with you kind of asking the rhetorical question as well, because the more I think about it, you know, and with you making that point, it's quite scary, actually. It's quite scary how pretty much every time STEM is referred to as STEM, that it's almost like a tick box type of thing where people refer to it. And as you say, I don't generally hear people, unless it's talking about a specific school subject, you know, certainly in terms of career pathways, you know, it seems to be used just as a label for that kind of general area, but it's huge, right? It's absolutely huge. So yeah, that'd be great to hear your reflections on each of those areas, really.
yes, and as far as I know, it was not used to be like this. So it's kind of a path we are now on, taking a look at it holistically, even though that's a bit artificial, I think.
Mm.
So if you take a closer look at it, then what you will see is that the way a mathematician thinks has something to do with the way a scientist or a way an engineer thinks, yet it's different. So what is common in all these is that they are all about rules and all about abstraction. When you look at it from the brain perspective, so how our brain works on these problems. On the other hand, even the basic questions and the interests are very different. So for example, a mathematician, what's the topic of a mathematician? What's the main question of a mathematician is, can we prove it? So that's about logical construction. And with this, basically, I always think of mathematics as the purest form of how the playful human brain acts on abstraction, on an abstract level, which is very different from the basic question of science, which is, can we understand how the world works? Can we do it on an evidence basis, which is now, the rules are very different. So in mathematics, the rules are dictated by logic, and that's why it is hard for us, because that's not the natural environment of the evolution of the human brain. So our brain is not evolved to do maths. It's a side effect, basically, that we can do this. And for science, the hardship comes from the fact that the rules come from nature, and nature does not really care about your opinion. So it's a completely different thing, right? Because here the problem is that our brain evolved in a social context. it is used to decipher what other people think, because they do think stuff about us, they care about us, but nature does not. So it needs a different kind of approach. And for engineering, the main question is, can we build it, and how can we build it, which is yet a very different question. So if you have a child, for example, interested, just having enjoying doing maths, it doesn't mean that she will be interested in the other two, and you have to pick up on that.
Yeah, and absolutely, with you're right. With my own children, I mean, I've got 3 children, and I can see that in them. They've all grown up in the same environment. I'm not massively aware that my parenting, whilst I'm absolutely flawed in my parenting in a number of regards, I'm not aware that I've particularly parented them massively differently, and yet they've all gravitated towards different subjects that they're interested in and not. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in this idea of rules-based learning as well, Jan, because one of the things, obviously, with family learning is the audience is families, right? It's parents and children. And a lot of the family learning programs that traditionally have been available in what's called wider family learning, so not so much the family literacy, language and numeracy side of things, which is the area where we traditionally would have explored family maths, for example. There's a lot of demand for programs around parenting techniques, and of course a lot of parenting programs is around boundary setting and so forth. And yeah, I mean, in a society that has rules, but then not necessarily everybody finds it easy to follow rules, if you see where I'm coming from. I mean, what role potentially do you think that STEM based, and I'm using that there again as a general term, what kind of role might STEM based subjects have to, I suppose, support families with engaging with rules in daily life?
But that's a really hard question. So first of all, for us humans, it's natural to follow rules. That's why we are able to build the societies we are able to build. Otherwise, our brain couldn't handle this amount of complexity that comes from approximately beyond 150 people. You just can't follow the hierarchy. You don't know who is who, and so on. So our brain evolved to handle rules in order to be able to handle the increased complexity of a bigger society, which has its obvious evolutionary advantage. Now, so I would say it's somehow natural in this context. Now, if we take out the social context and we talk about mathematics or talk about science, then these rules are a bit different. So, and there are different there are different relationships you will establish with these rules. So even though rules and learning STEM subjects helps to understand society and how society works, it's a bit indirect in a sense. So one comes more natural to us and the other does not. Now, with globalization and the global problems we are facing now, how we should think about those problems and what those problems in terms of complexity really are actually in many cases much closer to the scientific understanding of rules and how complex systems work. So in these cases, your intuition of smaller societies might fail you. And this is something that's very important, I think. And it's not mainstream now to say, okay, for example, not every rule, not every opinion is created equal. In democracies, that's not natural. We want opinions to be equal. In science, it's not. So if you have an idea how nature works and nature does not work like that, then it's a worthless idea. And you have to have the humility to put down your head and say, okay, I have to work more. And this is not something that contemporary parenting necessarily supports.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I'd never thought of that connection. But yeah, I mean, you're right as well. If we think about parenting practices nowadays that are accepted, let's say, and I know that there is a spectrum of acceptance in terms of parenting practices, and of course that varies as well from culture to culture, right? But I suppose, if thinking about it, about the skill shortage in STEM, thinking about the challenges there are for the recognized gaps in terms of people choosing to go into STEM careers or develop STEM subjects compared to some other subjects, what impact do you think that those kind of accepted current day practices as parents might have on the ability of the children, to actually, well, not just the children, but the children and the adults, if they want to reskill, what impact do those parenting practices have on those families thinking about developing their skills and careers in STEM?
I think they have huge impact. So one, you mentioned the constraints. They are extremely important, I think, when you raise a child, and when you think about creativity, when you think about innovation, then these constraints, what are the sensible boundaries of your exploration of a topic? These are very important. And if you raise your child not setting constraints, the child won't be able to develop her senses, so to say, in a constrained, safe environment, which then you can gradually increase.
Yeah.
So you just drop your child in a vacuum and say explore. It doesn't work for children. It doesn't work for adults. So this is one thing. So constraints, rules. We need to support our children with this. But there are other mainstream directions which do not help going into STEM. One is that we tend to now overexcite ourselves. If we are adults, we overexcite ourselves. If we are children, we overexcite ourselves. What does that mean? Everything has to blow up every 5 seconds. Otherwise, it's just boring.
With you saying about that, you've just reminded me with my own children. I mean, they used to go to, I won't name the company, but they used to go to holiday camps that were science-based. And I have to say, my eldest son in particular absolutely loved these camps, but it was all very kind of pre-packaged. And yeah, like you say, every activity, any activity they were doing, it was very dramatic, so like you say, I can imagine some people thinking, oh, obviously trying to attract people, thinking, oh yeah, if they think they're going to be blowing something up every 2 days, or they've got like test tubes with like green liquids and smoke everywhere, that's going to make people want to get into science.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
like you say, I mean, that's a bit like I used to want to be an architect, and then somebody told me, well, you do know you're going to end up designing quite a lot of garages. And I'll be honest, that completely put me off, because it completely de-glamorized it for me, even if that wasn't the case. So yeah, I hear what you're saying, and you presumably think that is a problem, do you?
Oh, absolutely, it is, because it gives a false image of what this is about. So if you are interested in blowing stuff up, you might not be that interested in putting years of work to understand the subject, which is needed if you really go into STEM. So it gives this false impression of what's going on if you are an engineer or a scientist or a mathematician. But we find it nowadays problematic or hard to capture the attention of other people or children, because now we are so much used to immediate gratification, which is, if I'm bored for 5 seconds, it's just a matter of a click, and now I'm being entertained.
Yes.
And this is actually very much working against going into STEM, where you should actually say, oh, I'm bored, brilliant. How silly does that sound, right?
Yeah.
We are not used to it, but actually utter boredom leads to you thinking in yourself, okay, now what shall I do? And you start to think and use your creativity and entertain yourself and your brain. And in this, for example, mathematics, science gives a huge amount of satisfaction.
Well,
And
exactly.
you never get there if you can just click on YouTube. You never get there.
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. And I mean, I don't live a million miles away from, tapping into the stereotype here. I don't live a million miles away from where Isaac Newton went to school and where he was said to sit under the apple tree, and the apple tree, the apple fall, and, theory of relativity. Is it relativity? Gravity?
Gravity.
See, I told you about my A-level physics. What am I
It's
like?
actually connected, so you are not far away.
See what I mean?
It's the same thing, but
what am I
yeah.
like? But yeah, I'm imagining that, if Isaac Newton probably hadn't been a bit bored sitting under a tree, who knows? He may not have had that inspiration. So yeah, I completely agree. And seeing my 3 children as well, having that downtime is a really, really unusual, special time, but it's difficult for them to cope with in the modern day, right? Now, coming back to the role of teachers and schools, okay, because we know from the data that there is a massive connection between parents perhaps not speaking with children as they're growing up about STEM subjects or STEM careers as being attractive or achievable, right? So if we imagine we take that as a problem in terms of a barrier potentially to pupils going into these fields, coming back to schools, what role do you feel that schools and teachers have in terms of teaching kids STEM subjects? And how do you see the family learning model potentially as adding value to the work that teachers do?
Let me first answer the question, is it normal? So if you are, for example, a parent and you feel, oh, my child might be interested in maths, for example, but I have no idea about maths whatsoever. Now, what shall I do? This is normal. So as said, this is not natural for most of us. So most of our brains do not work like these abstract rule-based things come as natural. So it's normal. Now you still have to do something with that, right? I think in this context, it is extremely important how the parents work together with the teachers. So you as a parent have to be open-minded in identifying the interests of your children, and whatever those interests are, STEM or not, because it's the same for me. If my son starts to write poetry, or my other one loves to compose music, I know nothing about those things. But once I identify these interests, I know that I have people around me, and many of them are teachers in the school or outside of school, who can take care of this interest of the child. So there has to be really a close collaboration between parents and teachers, and they have to try to decode the children together and satisfy their interests, regardless of what that interest is.
Yeah, and like you say, it's that I think I've mentioned before, it's that triangle, right? You've got the pupils, you've got the school and the teachers, and you've got the parents. And it seems like an obvious thing, and my experience is a lot of schools think they are doing this and they are not. That kind of tick list mentality. Oh, we can show the inspectors, we've sent a survey out to parents, or we've had parents evenings. That, especially like you say, where there are these barriers to career choices such as in STEM, there needs to be so much more additional dialogue, arguably, doesn't there, to actually compensate for that gap. Now, the only thing I would say is on that, given that teachers have a really important role to play in STEM confidence and career choices, to reinforce those messages parents might be having at home. Specifically for teachers, Jan, what challenges do you think face teachers in supporting kids with the STEM curriculum, actually during the school day, for example, or during homeschooling?
So one key thing we already talked about, getting the attention of children. That's not necessarily easy today, and I think it's extremely important what kind of work do you do early when the child is still young, because because it just gets worse. This you know, when children get their first smartphones and so on, they are spending more and more time in front of a screen, and this immediate gratification pattern comes into their mind, and boredom is something they are trying to avoid at all costs. You have to handle that before this happens, I think. So they have to learn, the children have to learn when they are still young, that entertaining themselves with their brains, focusing, is getting into flow, is something that gives a lot of satisfaction. This is a hard challenge for a teacher, I think, especially in a class setting when you have many children on different levels.
Yeah.
Digitization does not help either. So this is also becoming a trend, I think, that okay, if children are used to these gadgets at home, now this is what they know, this is their environment, so let's use them at school. It might not help. It's a similar thing that if you if you have a TV, and you try to work in front of your TV while you're getting used to using the TV for pure passive entertainment, you might not be at the right place to do that work in front of the TV. It's very similar. It activates bad patterns, I think. Then interdisciplinary projects, like you said with the Bloodhound, that's a dragster car, right? So that's a fine piece of technology with a lot of parts and components. These are called interdisciplinary projects because you need various parts from STEM for these to work. Now, the problem with this is that you can't expect a teacher to really be advanced in all of the parts of such an interdisciplinary project. So in my opinion, they are sometimes too demanding on the teacher, these interdisciplinary projects. They are too interdisciplinary, or if they are interdisciplinary, you would need more experts, teachers collaborating closely together, teaching the children, which is additional load on the teacher, who are already tend to be overloaded. So this is something society has to handle, and it's not an easy task. Now, on the other hand, I think that these projects are not interdisciplinary enough. Okay. Because
paradoxical.
Yeah, because when we think about interdisciplinary projects in STEM, we tend to think about, okay, there has to be this part of there is a part of chemistry, there is a part of physics, then there is the mathematical models behind it, then we do this maths and stuff, and we do the engineering, systems engineering, how the stuff interact, how we put that together, and so on.
Yeah.
The problem is what we don't handle, I think, when we teach these things is the human background. So even in interdisciplinary projects, in our curriculum nowadays, we tend to forget what science, for example, really is. It's a human endeavor, mathematics, engineering, the same. So it's really how humanity moves on the forefront of their abilities, expanding their abilities. And there are people doing this. And I don't think there is enough emphasis on that, on the actual people, on the historical context, in the cultural zeitgeist. There's a lot of missing parts in the puzzle, which helps children to understand what is really going on. So what was really going on when, for example, Newton had those ideas? Currently, it looks like as if science, maths, and engineering would be put together by individual heroes. And this is a very false picture. Science and human culture in general, and science as part of it, does not work like this. It's really generations over generations building up on each other's knowledge. And there are actual
agile iterating.
yeah, kind of, yes, because no single person can come up with such ideas, and there is a time when the time is is ripe for a change, for an invention, for a discovery.
Mm,
You know, if, for example, Einstein wouldn't have found relativity,
mm,
somebody would have found it within, let's say, 10 years, because all the status of science, how it was by that time,
mm.
was really ripe for this change.
I
It
see.
was in the air, so to say. And this has to be understood, that you don't have to be a hero, let's say. You don't have to be a superhuman to
Mm.
be able to contribute to this global endeavor, what we call science and engineering and maths, in
It's a
order
re-
to,
Sorry, Jan.
yeah,
Carry on.
no worries, no
Yeah,
worries.
no, I was just going to say it's a really important point you've made as well, because you saw it with me, apart from the fact I got the wrong scientific principle with the wrong scientist. But, you know, this thing around, it's almost like bizarrely, it's almost like you say, without that backstory being taught as part of how STEM subjects are taught, people in the way that I did, you know, grip onto almost that celebrity stereotypes out of it. You know, you've got the visual things, right, about Newton and the apple. You've got Einstein, you know, and the hair, and you know, all of this stuff, you know, going on in terms of celebrities. And like you say, not only does that then not tell the full picture, but I suppose, you know, yeah, I mean, maybe as well, some kids growing up are thinking, well, you know, I'm not like them. I'm not like them. So I wouldn't do things that they're interested
Exactly.
in. And
And
when
that's the problem, exactly.
yeah, when it's caricatured, then I can imagine that then makes children feel further away from, you know, if there was already a barrier there. Now, the only other thing I was going to say is it strikes me, with you and I both working in tech, in the high tech industry, and also with us being agilists, you know, this concept of T-shaping in teams, you know, obviously you and I will be dealing with this all the time. And I think you make a really important point there, right, about teachers. You know, the reality is, how on earth, as you say, can teachers be expected to be experts right the way across the board on these multidisciplinary projects? You know, how can they ever get T-shaped, you know, or how can the children ever get T-shaped that are learning? And my personal view is that is where family learning has a really crucial added value contribution to make, because otherwise, like you say, the kids will have all this shallow learning in lots of different aspects of STEM, but it never goes actually deeper, deeper, deeper. And the home learning environment that is encouraged through the family learning activity, that is there when that's then where if the parents and carers have got enough access, you know, to expertise, I suppose, so that they can engage with the subjects, that's then when the parents have got that freedom with their children, with all of that time perhaps they have in the home learning environment, to take the learning deeper, right? So the question I've got for you, you know, you've talked about access to different experts. So yeah, I mean, in a home learning environment setting, you know, how important is it, do you think, that families have got access to those experts, you know, thinking about the different forms that expertise might take?
Extremely important. I can tell you about my own failure as a father trying to teach mathematics to my sons, who are extremely interested in that. But I'm just wrong in that. So I'm not really speaking the language of small children. And so I was overdoing it. I was doing it wrong. You know, it's a field by itself. Teaching is not easy, and there are people. Unfortunately, I managed to find in various subjects my children are interested in, those experts who really are experts of their field,
Mm,
be it mathematics or programming or whatever, and can really help the children. So I think as a society, we have to build up this support network um, that supports our children's learning in the different disciplines, whatever it comes into their mind. And in this, parents and teachers together identifying the needs of and interests of those children are very important, but sometimes they are not enough in order to be able to support the learning of the children. And in
sure.
this, the external experts, extracurricular activities, and you know, some extra lessons are really very important,
Mm,
and they are very effective, by the way. So
Yeah.
every 2 weeks, an hour, and it makes miracles if the right person is working with your children.
Well, I guess it can recalibrate that perception, can't it? Both for the parent and for the child about, oh, well, maybe actually it is fun, you know. And I mean, I know for my A-level physics, I definitely needed additional tuition, you know, to get through that. And it changed my perception on how fun even the subject could be.
That's a very important point, Susie. Let me interrupt you here. That it's very important that this support is there when your child lacks the minimum level.
mm,
She should jump over, because then she's going to be in trouble, right? On the
yeah,
other hand,
mm,
what I'm talking about more is what is neglected a bit more when it's especially when it's about STEM,
mm,
is that when there is an interest and an extra interest of the child, so she might be doing very well at school in maths, but that might not be enough.
yeah,
And so this support has to be there,
mm,
so that there is extra learning.
yeah,
Why is this important? Because in these interests, these are fueled by internal drive.
mm,
And this internal drive is so important in order to learn to do something for the sake of doing it,
mm-hmm.
enjoying it, focusing on it, and getting the experience of getting better and better at it.
Which feels
And for
awesome,
that,
right? Anybody, yeah.
yeah, this is a very human, this is in the human nature. And if we don't pay conscious attention to this, though, it's not easy to do that. It's not evident that we need this. So we have to pay conscious attention when we do it, or when our children are doing it, and support them. And these experts, external experts, so to say, are
Yeah.
very important in this, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's really powerful what you've just shared. And I think to extend it to the family learning context as well is that, I'm in a position as well where, if I saw one of my children that were really struggling with a particular subject, my eldest son is doing his senior exam, his 16-year-old exams, the GCSEs in the UK. If I saw him really struggling with something, I know I could reach out and get some tuition for him, right? But family learning originally in the UK, at least, was offered mainly only for families in the areas of highest deprivation. Yeah, those that were deemed to be the poorest. Now, as you know, my global campaign is to make family learning available for every family that wants to access it in the world, because I think the pandemic and all the homeschooling with the school closures has shown that every family in their own way can benefit and can need some support in some ways with sparking that love of learning in the home learning environment and all that has to offer. So just before we wrap up, Jan, this has been absolutely fascinating, and I'd just like to invite you to offer, if you had one call to action, in terms of STEM and addressing this skills gap, in terms of pupils that are choosing to study STEM subjects, adults perhaps are choosing to reskill, especially with the unemployment that there's been with the pandemic. What would and also for family learning, I suppose, in terms of how the sector responds, what would your call to action be?
I think, I can, however sad I think it would be, I can imagine a society without science, engineering, and mathematics.
Really?
Yeah, I can. It could work. We could survive like frogs do, or lizards do, or whatever. It wouldn't be the place I want to be, but it could work. On the other hand, I think we have as a society an obligation towards the people who are already choosing this path, regardless of what, regardless of the hardships, regardless of all the hard decisions they have to make in order to pursue such careers. They are out there. So when we talk about the vacuum in the STEM fields, that there are not enough talent on the STEM fields, what I observe is actually that there's a lot of talent already existing in the STEM field, and we as a society are underutilizing their talent, their abilities, and their internal drive. So I think rather than what we have to solve very soon is the leadership vacuum, how we lead these people, how we can support them as leaders so that they can really bring the best out of themselves and help us build a society.
Mm. I think that sounds fascinating, Jan, and I think that's going to need some agile in it, right? So
yeah, it has a lot to do with education. Yes.
So it sounds to me as if there's a whole other vlog potentially in having that discussion. But thank you so much, and thank you for educating me. Thank you for bringing me insights that I'd never thought of in terms of the potential of family STEM programs and how that might be taken forward. And so I suppose we'll be getting on with our day's work now, won't we? So lovely to catch up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Susie. It was a
Pleasure.
pleasure.
See you soon. Bye, Anne.
Goodbye. Bye.